I think there is certainly news to report on the weather front. We are looking, we talked about hints of changes last week at the briefing. They're definitely still there. And so that in the longer term, certainly in the medium range term, we are going to see very, very likely some changes to the it seems like a pattern that's gone on forever, but it's really several weeks of a very, very problematic type of weather pattern across most of the central U.S. I'm going to start by looking at the last week here, and this is really a repeat of where we've been for the last several weeks. Depending on where you were, the rainfall coverage in the state, even though in some areas was actually in some areas was very heavy, but it was more scattered than has been the case over much of the last couple weeks. That's on the left here. You can see most areas picked up in Michigan between 1 and 2 inches, but there were some exceptions to that. One of them, notably, up here, the Frankenmuth area, some reports of actually over 4 inches of rain. You can see that the little brown area here in this east central part of the state. But again, it's obviously above normal in most areas and is on the top of what's been heavier than normal precipitation all the way back into the early spring. One of the stories that is maybe not quite as noticeable unless you were in the very southern part of the state was our temperatures increased, especially across southern parts of the state. On the right here are mean temperatures. This is a departure from normal. And depending again on where you were, there was a very, very strong north to south gradient across the state where we had warmer than normal mean temperatures, especially across the southern couple tiers of counties in the state. Near normal in the northern lower, and then still continuing cooler than normal across central and western upper Michigan. So again, this is a result of some of the weather pattern of where we've been here, and that's where I'm going to go here next. But the big news overall, we talked about changes. The image on the left here is the very, very, very persistent upper air or jet stream pattern across North America that we've seen for much of the last several weeks, with troughing out over across the southern U.S., the western U.S., and then ridging over the southeast. And there was a fairly active northern branch or polar branch of the jet stream, which did influence especially northern parts of the state, and that leads or has led to that temperature pattern that you just saw. But more importantly, this pattern here with the southwesterly flow in the Midwest has just led to one after another weather systems moving southwest to northeast across the region. Well, you've seen, I'm sure, footage from all of the severe weather and flooding. By last count, and almost difficult to keep up, but 370 tornadoes just in the last 2 weeks. And I believe I did see a figure annually in the United States, 960 tornadoes thus far in 2019. And if you're wondering where that is way above normal. It's 200 more than we typically have in a whole year, to give you an idea. So it's just an incredibly active weather pattern. Michigan has been on the sort of the far northern and eastern edges of that pattern. Well, all that said, I mentioned changes. We finally can talk about changes, and the forecast guidance has been hinting at this. This is the forecast upper air pattern as we look towards the end of the first week of June, on the 6th of June, and you can see a very, very significant difference between the two patterns here. And we have the western trough basically filling in and moving off, and really the building of a ridge across the middle of North America. Michigan here in the Great Lakes region in northwesterly flow, and there's still some question about how this will eventually evolve, but depending on how close this ridge is, will have a lot of influence on our temperatures and mean temperatures, and I'll get to the medium range guides here in a moment. But more importantly, it should really, really make a difference in terms of rainfall. And the Gulf of Mexico and all of the moisture with it over the last several weeks, that will be cut off, and we'll be looking at most of our weather systems from, again, the northwest. And that's typically, for this time of the year, not a wet pattern. So if anything we can say, we should be looking at a drier type of weather pattern here setting up across Michigan certainly within the next week. Going specifically here to the outlooks, and these are surface conditions here this morning, forecast at 8 o'clock this morning. There's and this weather map would have worked last week. It would have worked 2 or 3 weeks before that, but yet another of the weather systems coming out of the southern Great Plains, right now centered in northern Illinois, with this frontal boundary here, which has also been here forever, west to east across the region. And of course, that frontal boundary is serving as a focusing mechanism for showers and thunderstorms, and the leading edge of some subtropical air to the south of it. And in some parts of Michigan, especially down in the southeastern corner of the lower peninsula, the front has been north of them, and they've actually seen some 80-degree high temperatures here. That's certainly the exception. Much of the state has been stuck in the 60s for some time. Again, just depends on where you are. This weather system is expected here to move off to the east and north during the next 12 hours or so, and bring us our next threat of rainfall, and that's actually happening right now as we speak here this morning, and will continue for the next several hours. Down in the lower right here, we have a radar pic from about 20 minutes ago, about 6:20 this morning, and you can see the precipitation, mostly scattered showers and thunderstorms. Those are going to move mostly to the east. So we can say one thing, this has also been common during the last week. Most of this rainfall activity will impact just the southern part of the state. I would say basically the southern half of lower Michigan, and it will remain dry going north of that. So that's an important distinction, and most of the rain confined again to the southern part. Most areas that see rainfall, we're talking about 1/4 of an inch, possibly some 1/2 inch amounts, especially as you get down towards the Indiana and Ohio border. Best chances in most of these areas will be during the middle and latter parts of the morning into the early afternoon. We could see some showers fire up once again in the far southeastern part of the state later this afternoon, but all of this activity should be coming to an end by late afternoon or early evening at the latest in the eastern part of the state. So not a very long system, and again, it won't be it should not be any heavy rainfall, but and certainly enough to keep delays on where the rainfall does occur. By tomorrow morning, we have high pressure moving in. This is a Canadian origin high pressure air mass. One thing of note here too, with cooler and drier air, it is possible in some interior northern areas of the state, especially the eastern upper peninsula and the interior northern lower, we could see some patchy frost. But this is not a widespread freezing event, but it could cause, again, on some low-lying areas, we could see some frost out there. Wouldn't be surprised. It will remain a little bit warmer than that as you go down into the central and southern lower. No threat there. This is, again, primarily just the northern part of the state. And then looking off to the northwest, you see the next weather system that will influence the state beginning during the day tomorrow in far and northern and western parts of the state. But over most of the state, this will be an issue overnight Friday into Saturday. And that's where we are here on Saturday morning. Forecast conditions, you can see that system moves south and east and brings with it at least a threat for some scattered showers and thunderstorms. And just has happened so many times over the last few weeks, this frontal boundary moves south into lower Michigan and then stalls out. That's sort of the scheme here, although it looks like the threat for precipitation with this second weather system will probably be ending late in the day on Saturday or by Saturday evening at the latest. But and the other thing, most areas with this, it will be scattered. It will not be widespread rainfall coverage either. But certainly 1/4 to 1/2 inch amounts are possible with this system where rainfall does occur, but not as heavy, not as extensive as many of the weather systems that we've observed here over the last couple weeks. After that, we are looking at dry weather developing late Saturday, continuing Sunday, and then into early next week. Beyond that, it looks like the next chance for significant rainfall not until probably overnight Tuesday or more likely on Wednesday of next week, and that also maybe not such a major weather or rain producer either. The other issue with this change, it will be relatively cool. High temperatures reaching around 70 in the far southern parts of the state as we move into the weekend and into early next week, and in the 60s north, lows generally in the 40s and 50s. So it will be a few degrees remaining cooler than normal here, at least for the majority of the upcoming week. Tomorrow, Friday, will likely be the warmest day of the upcoming week, and it probably will be the nicest weather day with temperature, or we should see high temperatures well into the 70s over most parts of the state, and even push 80 in the far southern part of the state before that next weather system rolls in overnight Friday. So tomorrow, if you do have outdoor activities, that's probably going to be the best day. Exception to that might be the far western and central upper peninsula where the system will be reaching there a little earlier. What's in the rain gauge here for the next week? This is also a big change from our last several briefings here. You can see a strong north to south gradient across the state, ranging from less than a quarter of an inch up in the far northern parts of the state to a half to 3/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit more than that along the Indiana-Ohio border again. Another note here, most of the rainfall depicted in this 7-day total will be falling over the next 48 hours or so. Again, that would be over this today and then overnight Friday into Saturday. That's where most of this will be, and that's why, again, we see most of the coverage and amounts in the southern part of the state. But after that, again, definitely looking at a drier weather pattern. This is the 8 to 14-day outlook from the Climate Prediction Center and NOAA for the 6th through the 12th, and that jet stream pattern that I talked about here on the left, this is depicted in that outlook. And again, it's leading to a significant change. If you look at the precipitation forecast over here, we have below normal indicated. There's a hint of that on the 6 to 10-day outlook as well. I think that is a good or strong bet at this point in time. Also note for mean temperature forecast, they do still have some below normal temperatures, mean temperatures indicated here in Michigan. I would put a question mark on this personally. Note that there's warmer than normal temperatures or weather right off to our west, even including parts of western upper Michigan, and also to our southeast. It would not take much here to see us actually go to warmer than normal, especially during the second week of June, and maybe a little bit beyond that. So there's some uncertainty as to how this pattern ultimately evolves, but one of the solutions definitely calls for that ridge to move further to the east, closer to the Great Lakes, and if that happens, we will go warmer than normal at some point, again, during the middle, maybe that second week or latter part of that second week of June. So, but definitely a change from where we've been. So summarizing here quickly, another weather system, the same pattern, the same old here for the next 24 to 48 hours. Most of the rain, though, today confined to the southern part of the state. Fair and warm over most of the state tomorrow. Beautiful day for most areas. And then the next weather system moves in late Friday into Saturday with the next chance for rain. But again, not widespread no widespread precipitation expected during that time frame. We do have scattered frost possible this evening, and also this would be late in the weekend as well, but no widespread freezing temperatures. It would probably be mid to upper 30s if this occurs. And then finally, again, as we said earlier, the medium range forecast guidance is strongly suggesting a trend towards drier conditions at least, and certainly towards more moderate temperatures, maybe even warmer than normal conditions as we move towards the middle of June. And I'll end with, Bruce mentioned the long lead outlooks. So we covered those a little bit last week, but those are still calling for the equal chances for mean temperature for much of the summer. So no forecast direction on mean temperature, although it is expected to be cooler than normal over large portions of the western Corn Belt to our west. I think the bigger news is it still calls for normal to above normal precip totals for much of the Midwest, including at least southern and central portions of Michigan. And that's all I have. If anyone has any questions this morning, thanks.
Thank you, Jeff.
Bruce, where are we as far as growing degree days?
The southern tier, at least in our area, we're fairly close to normal. I have not looked across the entire state, Phil. I'm sorry about that.
Phil, if you look at the degree day totals, that's Bruce is right. However, in the northern parts of the state, especially the upper peninsula, the northern lower, they're still lagging far behind. In some cases, 2 calendar weeks still behind. So it really varies greatly from south to north, but they're close to normal in the far south now.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.